sharing is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to share some material from a book that came out recently from Quaker Institute for the Future. And I've written out my comments. I may add a few things as I go, but I tend to rattle on because I have so much to say. So I thought I'd write it out, and most of its majority will be actually quotes from the book that I wanted to share with you that I thought might be appropriate for today. So a few years ago, I found myself writing a book on some of the big freaking problems that we face as a species. Ecological collapse, climate change, wars of mutually assured destruction, and especially the threats of runaway technology with artificial intelligence. It was all very systematic and sort of big picture. I teach philosophy and peace studies and AI and other things at College Atlantic. So I tend to think a lot in terms of academic context and theories and so on. And I was rushing to find answers to these big problems. I wanted sort of rigorous theoretical answers with very concrete practical applications and actions that we could take to deal with it. And I was doing better on the theory part than on the practical in some ways, but then had the good fortune to collaborate with a writing group at the Quaker Institute for the Future. QIF, or the Quaker Institute for the Future, was founded 20 years ago as a Quaker think tank to work on social and environmental problems with research informed by Friends' values, but it also quickly developed ways of doing research in a distinctive way, informed by Quaker practices. The idea was to take what we learned in clearness committees and Quaker meetings for worship for the conduct of business and apply it in what we called meetings for worship for the conduct of research. So working out of the silence, trying to do spirit-led research. And I started working with a circle of discernment, applying those practices in research on artificial intelligence. And part of what it led me to was reflection on how big picture questions have been related directly to my personal life experience and my family growing up, both myself and then later raising kids of my own. And that led me to some really basic insights about how we should start thinking about public policy and ethics in general. And one key insight that grew out of paying careful attention to some of the pains and traumas and problems that I had experienced with family, and with ways in which they and I tried to be loving towards each other. It led me to the conclusion that one of the most common and basic ideas about love, which was ingrained in my early Sunday school experience — I grew up in a Methodist church — one of the most basic ideas was fundamentally wrong. I'm talking about the golden rule. This idea that you should do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So I'd like to share something from the start of the book that grew out of that reflection and insight. And so let me just kind of jump into it, okay? My grandmother thought of herself as a good Christian. She grew up in a well-to-do German-speaking home in Baltimore. And she married a successful businessman who placed her in charge of a large household with servants, where she exercised a strong sense of authority as the matriarch of our extended family. We gathered often at her house for events like Sunday dinners after church and touch football on the lawn. She had strong and definite views about what, when, where, and how people should eat, relax, what they should wear, how they should dress, educate children, and so on. But what she thought of as generosity was sometimes not much appreciated. Her decisions could lead to all kinds of tensions, frustrations, and even scandals amongst my parents, brothers, aunts, uncles, and cousins, as well as the African Americans that she employed as cook, groundskeeper, or nanny. She thought she was following the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But the results often left others feeling quite unloved. Many of us in this extended family had very different interests, preferences, tastes, perceptions, and views of the world than hers on issues like breastfeeding or belonging to a union, if you're an electrician, like my dad was. So in treating us as she would want to be treated, she treated us in ways which we did not like at all, often. It could feel less like love and more like self-centered, oppressive control over our lives. When I was 10, the extended family tensions helped precipitate a nervous breakdown in my own mother, leading her to drag me and my brothers and my dad off to a new home 500 miles away up here in Maine. Other tensions led a cousin to serious behavior problems that resulted in addiction and eventually death. These seem to be clear cases of the golden rule not working out well. The number of cases in which the golden rule has not worked well suggests the problem is not with the people practicing it, but with the rule itself. Consider, for example, the case of missionaries trying to live out their Christian faith by going around the world to do good for others. Often well-meaning Catholic monks, evangelical pastors, Quaker school teachers, and others have gone to great sacrifice to bring basic necessities of life to indigenous communities around the world. But they've done so as part of an effort to share religious beliefs and practices to save their souls. From the missionary's point of view, if he or she was a pagan living in unbelief, what they would want most would be for others to do unto them the act of conversion, to convert them to Christianity. They would want this even if it meant destroying their traditional forms of marriage, family, farming, and communal life. They would want this even if, in the words of the 19th century American teachers, including Quakers, at the Indian boarding schools, it meant killing the Indian to save the man. The problems with the golden rule begin to come up when the people we are dealing with are not like us. If their cares, concerns, values, cultures, and ways of looking at the world are different, then they may not want us to treat them the way we ourselves would like to be treated. They may not like that at all. Instead, they may quite naturally want us to use their views and values to decide how to treat them. This world is a rich and many-colored place with all sorts of interesting variety in it. To treat people well, we need to be mindful of that, understand their context, and try to walk a mile in their moccasins. Even if we don't speak their language or understand their context, we need to respect their differences enough to ask them how they would like us to treat them, rather than assume that we know based on our own experience. Instead of viewing the world through a monochromatic golden rule, it seems wiser to follow the rainbow rule. Do unto others as they would have you do unto them. So I've got another little section about parenting daughters that illustrates this. I'll share with you. I grew up spending a good deal of time outdoors, and clothing was a tool that enabled me to bushwhack through brush and catch trout in a cold spring stream. As for how my outfits looked, getting muddy and messed up was inevitable, and I wasn't going to be staring at any mirrors out on the trail, so why care? Later, as a parent of young girls, I found myself in repeated conflict whenever we dressed and packed to go on some outing here on the island where I was raising them. Attitudes and practices around clothing are strongly influenced by a variety of cultural values and institutions which are typically strongly informed by patriarchal gender systems. But in conflicts with my daughters over dressing for these outings, for quite a while I gave no thought to such larger considerations. I thought my daughters were each just plain foolish in what they kept wanting to put on their feet and wear as outfits. I would try to make them dress in the ways that I was sure were appropriate for their own good, only to hear a stream of whining and refusal. But then I began to have conversations that shed light on some related questions, like, these were real big questions for me. Why did girls like to play at dressing up and having weddings? Why did women sometimes spend an hour or more a day getting dressed to go out? Why did they puncture holes in their ears so they could hang things from them that might get caught in their hair? Why would they wear shoes that made it hard to run and get out of the way of an oncoming car? Why would you do that? I found these questions puzzling in a very basic way, until I heard some replies, like, Gray, the way you look affects the way other people perceive and experience and relate to you. And relationships are central to life. It makes sense to practice dressing up for special occasions and play imaginatively at taking part in events that may be among the most decisive in your life. Reflection led me to see my daughters had a systematically different way of looking at the world. Contrasting viewpoints like this provide great material for comedians. They can make us, if the comedian's good, they can make us laugh uproariously at the incongruity of the two points of view. For example, Dad, we're going to hike the rock face of a mountain where it might suddenly rain and you want to wear those flimsy little shoes? Daughter, you want me to go out in public where I might see my friends or meet some new boys and you want me to wear those ugly big clunky things on my feet? Dad, nobody's going to care what you look like when you're out tromping on the trail. Daughter, if nobody's going to care what I look like, then why are we doing this in the first place? Dad, because it's an adventure. Daughter, what is wrong with you? Why are you so weird? Just like other people in positions of power, parents can feel they have the right as well as the duty to impose their judgments on others for their own good. The Golden Rule invites us to just that way of thinking. To children in subordinate positions of power, such impositions can seem self-centered, uncaring, unloving, and egocentric. And there's often considerable truth in that perception. But typically, the person in power means well. In trying to get my daughters to dress as I thought appropriate, I was trying to do right by them, given my worldview. In that sense, the conflict here was between two communities, me and fellow adventurers who didn't mind looking a mess, versus my daughters and their world of women who cared very much about appearances and how they framed and affected relationships. Much everyday conflict at home, work, and the world at large turns on differences like these. I found solutions to the great clothing wars by backpacking extra clothing for when the cold and the wet made them ready to sacrifice appearance for comfort. On their side, they learned to negotiate plans for outings and preparations, including clothing purchases that allow them to dress in attractive ways and bring friends. Two things softened me up over time for these negotiations. First, I recalled how I felt as a child when my mom and grandmother had imposed their clothing preferences on me. And second, my daughters became increasingly effective in nonviolent, though sometimes not very civil, resistance to my authority. Maybe you've been there. Their complaints, non-cooperation, and boycotts took a toll. They also gave me pause to consider if I was missing something important. These encounters illustrated three basic lessons. One is, in dealing with people, it is better to start with the rainbow rule and negotiate ways to treat them as they want to be treated. And second, the rainbow rule requires skill in conflict resolution to develop solutions everyone can agree on. And then third, nonviolent resistance can be powerful. And when we act on the golden rule by imposing our values on others, we do so at our peril. So those are sections from the book. Just in closing, I'll note that switching to the rainbow rule involves challenges. We have to learn to listen and hear what others want and find ways to take everyone and every creature in the community into account. Deal with disagreements, uncertainties, and reason dialogically to resolve conflicts and use nonviolent methods to discern moral truths that can guide us. But it is my experience that there is a light that can guide us in doing so. And it is there in each and every one of us, ready to shine through and make way open. So in the book, I go on to try and think about, well, so how do you do this in economics and politics and with technology? And how can we get these newfangled AI that seem conversational, almost dialogical, like ChatGPT, that maybe you're starting to seem almost like they're persons, like children or something. How can we raise ethical AI by becoming a more ethical village for them to grow up in? So thanks for letting me share that. And yeah, there are copies of the book out here. If anybody wants a free review copy, or it's there if you want to just buy one for personal use. They're $10 for author's discount. It's also, there's an electronic version PDF that's available on the website for it, if you're interested in that. Let me know.
I have a 30-year-old daughter living in Belfast who's participating in a play, a maskers play, and I asked her what her role was, and she says, well, I'm the daughter of a crazy father. I thought, oh my God.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gray.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Well, thank you all. So.